Welcome to Turning the Table, the most progressive weekly podcast for today's food and beverage industry, featuring staff-centric operating solutions for restaurants in the hashtag New Hospitality Culture. Join Jim Taylor of Benchmark 60 and Adam Lamb as they turn the tables on the prevailing operating assumptions of running a restaurant in favor of innovative solutions to our industry's most persistent challenges. Thanks for joining us. And now, on to the show. Welcome back to our hashtag Lunchbox live stream here at Turning the Table. This is episode 3, and we're going to be discussing the hustle culture. I'm here with good friend Jim Taylor of Benchmark 60, and as always, Turning the Table is sponsored by Benchmark 60. So, yeah, of course we would have him, right?
Morning. How's it going? Well, I guess afternoon if you're in the East, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We cover all time zones here.
We do.
And so for those of you, this is the first time that you're actually seeing this. We broadcast live every Thursday at noon, and we're doing it on LinkedIn, YouTube, and on Facebook. And the whole idea is staff-centric hashtag operating solutions for today's restaurateurs. And we speak to a lot of people in the restaurant industry, don't we, Jim?
Yeah, everybody. I mean, had a conversation with a guy in a cafeteria the other day, had a discussion with a senior living person last week, you know, the hotel part of the industry. You and I were chatting a lot about the hotel side of things the other day. Mm-hmm. You know, mainstream restaurant, QSR, full service. I mean, you name it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because I'm not going to do that because I'm going to get an echo. It's so funny. It's no news that everybody's
Here's
trying to.
Something I found on the web. Holy Crap is a food brand. Did that answer your question?
Thank you, Echo. Yes, it did. Holy Crap is a food brand? Wow. That's amazing. Let me just mute him while I'm at it. Little echo down here in the Dish Pit studios. So it's no news to anybody that they're doing less or doing more with less, which kind of backs into our conversation today about the hustle culture.
Yeah.
And how that's actually killing the restaurant industry right now.
Well, I think it's always been killing the restaurant industry. It's just front and center all of a sudden.
Right.
I don't know. I think I sent you some of this stuff. I was reading some stats the other day from Restaurants Canada, but I'm sure it's the same in the US or close to, that there was an unbelievably low number of restaurants compared to what I assumed that have actually increased people's pay this year. But it was almost 80% of restaurants are actually asking their people to work more hours than they already were before. I talked to someone yesterday. She told me at 108 hours on her last 2-week pay period.
What?
I mean, that's not sustainable, right? That's just crazy.
No, it's not. And I know that everybody's in this crunch where they can't find good help, or so they say they can't find good help.
Yeah.
I just did a post this morning about, the folks that are complaining that they can't get qualified staff are probably the same people who are still trying to hold on to their wage levels from pre-pandemic. They're resistant to trying to add any benefit packages because they can't really calculate the ROI of like, how the hell is that going to actually help us in the long run? And someone responded to the post that, it's weird how people are resistant to trying to do anything to better the lot of their associates, which to me is just shocking. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to make anybody wrong, but, typically those are the operators that nobody wants to work for. So they're actually right. You are right on the money. Nobody wants to work for you if you're not going to do something outside of the box. And we've been exploring all kinds of things that people have been talking about, but insofar as increasing benefit packages without necessarily getting kicked in the bottom line. But why don't you talk for a bit about what your experience of the hustle culture was when you were actively managing?
Yeah. Well, I was really lucky to work for a really cool, really innovative, really growth focused, front and center in the industry in Western Canada, well, Canada in general. I was really lucky to work for a great company. But, the interesting thing looking back now, even some of the things that we did, and we believed, and they still do believe in taking really good care of people. Good benefits packaging, good reward and recognition, good compensation, all of that stuff. The people that work there are some of, they get really well taken care of in terms of industry standard. But there was still this like underlying hustle culture that was kind of never spoken about, but if you didn't follow it, you just sort of weren't successful. And, the thing that I always, and looking back, I was guilty of this too, but the thing that I always think about is we use this term resiliency all the time with our people. And so, people who are resilient get promoted, and people who are resilient move forward in this organization. And, I would say, not to pick on that organization, but it's about the industry in general. People who are resilient have opportunity and move forward and grow and get promoted and get a raise and all these things. What our industry is really saying by that, though, looking back now, is not who's resilient. It's who doesn't complain, who just puts their head down and works, who just goes in on their day off, who does their admin at home. I remember I used to write all of the one that sticks out to me, or something I was thinking about this morning. I used to write all of my schedules when I was a general manager for December. I would write the whole month schedule at once, right? Because my goal was that I wanted to make sure that my team had the ability to plan around the holidays, right? They either work New Year's or they work Christmas, or they work Boxing Day or they work New Year's Day. We tried to get that stuff out. But looking back at the resilience thing, well, I took one whole weekend, because I didn't have time to do it within my work hours. I took one of my whole weekends with a couple of bottles of wine and sat there and wrote schedules for like 12 hours straight. And, looking back at it now, I'm like, okay, so this was good for the team probably, but I burnt myself out in one of the busiest times of the year, trying to do that stuff. So I think it's just, this resiliency concept in our industry. We need to find a way to reframe that, because people are just conditioned, and it's, you and I've talked about this badge of honor thing, put your head down and go. And it's just not sustainable.
Yeah. I'm glad you bring up the badge of honor thing, because it's this veneration of not just hard work, but really abusing yourself in order to support whatever version of you want to promote to your employers or to your friends or whatever. And I have to think that, looking back at my career, that I was my own worst enemy. I was the one that was actually promoting the hustle culture and this idea that, you're going to go in there and you're going to do the best thing, and then using that to train, shame, and condition everybody around me. And very often it's not anything that you say, but it's just like, if there's a tight relationship, a lot of emotional capital that's been put into that piggy bank between you and your staff, as soon as they start see you shift, then all of a sudden they all kind of fall back, because they're all taking their emotional cues from us as supervisors and leaders, which is what I consider to be job one for us, is to get rid of that whole hustle culture. Like, if we're planned properly, and when I mean planned properly, we're also planning for things to go sideways, that the shipments are coming late, or that we're getting mispicks on our orders, or whatever that is. We plan that into our day of action so that there's no stress, so that there's no hustle. Like, one of my favorite examples is the health inspector is at the back door. So everybody starts scrambling, like everybody's got prearranged orders of what they're going to do. But it's this mad scramble to have everything in perfect condition for when the health inspector comes in, when in fact that should be your operating standard anyway.
Yeah.
So that there is no hustle. And if it's not coming from us, then no one else is going to do that for us. So, we've got a couple people from all over the world watching us today. We've got Stanley from Tanzania, Africa. We've got John Stapleforth from the UK, who says he's loving the show, which is awesome, because as this reach widens, again, one of these things about our Lunchbox live stream is to get a couple actionable items from our discussion, so that folks can turn around, go back into their operation, and start affecting change right away. Because culture happens from the ground up. It's all elbow to elbow. It's nothing that comes out of a box or some corporate boardroom or the HR department. I don't want to make anybody mad in the HR sector, but we know it's about compliance and how important that is. And yet, if culture is not happening at the ground level, it's just going to get watered down. So culturally speaking, then we're going to have to be the ones that breaks the back of this hustle culture and venerating abusive working conditions and hours, whether that means, going to a 4-day work week, which a lot of operations are playing around with, or considering, looking at your P&L, is there a day where you can close and then get everybody off at the same day? I always thought that was brilliant, that you could put your entire crew off the same 2 days so that you have this consistency all the way through. I'm not advocating that people close for 2 days, but it may make sense in part of the season or part of the year. I don't know. I mean, I know in Europe, August is typically a month where everybody takes off. Everybody, except for people working in restaurants and hotels.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like we need to sort of clarify something around this hustle culture thing. Hustle is important, and hustle is awesome, and hustle is fun, and hustle is, when it's needed, it's really, ultimately one of the most important, I think, skills you can have. If you look at any other industry, right? Everything from when if someone's an accountant to someone's a pilot to someone, there's hustle time. It's like, it's go time, professional sports, the playoffs, all those things. There's time when you got to hustle. Yeah. I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, in Western Canada, where the Calgary Stampede is, and it's 10 days, and it's insane. It's this giant rodeo and beer gardens everywhere. And, hundreds of thousands of people come to the city, and it's go time. It's like 10 days straight of nonstop, especially if you work in a restaurant. It's hustle time, but it doesn't have to be, 108 hours on your paycheck in the middle of August, when you shouldn't necessarily have to do that. And, I think we were, a few of us on the team were talking the other day about the difference between hard work and having to work too hard.
Yeah, absolutely. That goes back to some of my earlier influences. There was a guy by the name of Ed Manazian, who was the meanest front of the house manager I have ever met in my life. And when I met him, he was in his 70s and still working the floor. And he would constantly pound it into my head, Lamb, you got to plan your work and work your plan. You got to plan your work and work your plan. And some people are just chiming in with some of the things that they've seen that have been working in their operations. Hustle is great, Jim, except if you're a customer. Right? If I don't want my service staff to be so hustled that I can't get my next drink.
Right.
Right. So there's this idea of what Benchmark 60 has gotten so good at being able to accurately forecast and then actively manage workloads, which is completely different than just going in and saying, okay, your labor percentage was 2 points high yesterday. What are you going to do to recapture that today?
Yeah. Yeah. That workload piece it's been a game changer for lots of places, because you're, not only, like you said, is it a tool for, managing labor costs, but if you look at that concept over an extended period of time, if you go back to a time when you worked in restaurants where there was just, maybe you were short staffed, or maybe it was a really exceptionally busy summer, or there was a bunch of events going on, or, whatever, there could be a million different factors. But go back to one of those times in your career in operations when everybody had to just really grind for an extended period of time. Oh, yeah. What happened? People quit.
Right.
There's a threshold, right?
Right.
And that workload concept of measuring that in a restaurant allows you to get ahead of that and say, okay, I know that if we pass this certain level, everyone's going to hate it.
Right. And
what happens then? People quit. So, there's direct connection between how hard the team has to work and turnover.
Mm-hmm. This badge of honor thing too, and speaking again of my own experience, what it allowed me to do was to engage in some really poor behavior insofar as my own health and wellness. If you think of it as a totem pole and putting everyone up above me, then that meant that I was constantly in service to everyone else except for myself. And when it came time for me to, for lack of a better word, take some time and refill my cup, I was pretty well broken by that point and no good to anyone. And then I would have to go back and basically recommit to all my fellow managers and associates, and say, hey, I realize I haven't been here fully for you, and I'm really sorry about that. can you accept my apology? And this is what I'm committed to moving forward. I've always been incredibly transparent about what's happened in my professional and personal life, because if I want somebody to be vulnerable and transparent to me, then there's no way that I can advocate for that if I'm not going to do it first. Now, I need to practice a little discernment, because not everybody needs to know what I do in my personal time, but I'm pretty sure that, we're all going to come up against the same factors if we're in this business. So I like to also remind people that if you're in this business, you are by de facto a sensitive soul, or have a sensitive spirit, because you get something emotionally from being in service to somebody else, which is an honorable thing, which is a sacred thing.
Very true.
But it's a completely different thing when you abdicate your own, you either tie that to your self-worth, or you put yourself at the bottom of the totem pole. You just got back. I mean, not just got back, because you're still not sweating, but you took time out of your busy day to do what, a 45-minute thing? What'd you do
this morning? Yeah. Still a little red in the face.
Well, why do you think that that's important for you to get done first thing in the day consistently?
Well, for me, it's just as much mental as it is physical, for sure. I mean, it puts you in the right space.
Yeah. Because there's this energy that gets built up in our bodies being under this stress. And really, there's only a couple of different ways to expel that energy. And one of the most powerful ways that I've seen is, by exercising, for sure.
Yeah.
Because there's just nothing better than sweating in that particular way.
Yeah. In a positive way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so to anybody who says to you, well, listen, man, I don't have a choice. I got to hustle. Like, sometimes it just pisses me off to see some of these posts by people who are claiming now on LinkedIn now we have influencers on LinkedIn that are trying to use the algorithm as they would for TikTok or Instagram, but they're advocating this hustle thing. Like it's great, to go out there and hustle. Like, yes, you got to pull up your bootstraps. Yes, you're responsible for your own success. But how are we going to break people out of this hustle culture within the industry that basically negates self and puts everyone else above us?
So here's one of the things that I think is interesting. This is aligned with what you're saying right now. If you look at what's going on in multiple other industries outside of restaurants and multiple governments, actually, there's starting to be these limitations placed on what happens in the workplace, right? Ontario, a province in Canada, for those that aren't in Canada, has now implemented a law that your employer cannot call you outside of office hours. It's illegal.
Yep. Okay.
So that's a protecting of employee workload, right? You get the 4-day work week things that are happening. You get even something as simple as, people went crazy a few years ago when Facebook said, wear whatever you want to work. Wear a hoodie. I don't care. Our industry, and this is where I'm, sometimes on a bit of an island, but, people like you and a few others are definitely helping to rally the troops on this, is that the same type of stuff is possible in our industry. Our industry just seems to just be stuck and not be able to wrap our heads around it. And it's still this 108 hours on my paycheck every 2 weeks. It's still this, I don't want to close an extra day because you got to grind, and it's a penny industry, and its margins are tight, and those types of things. But it's possible while still doing some of these other things that the rest of the world has figured out how to do.
Correct.
I woke up this morning to some very interesting messages in my DM from somebody who was quite passionate about the fact that everything that we're trying to accomplish at Benchmark 60 is a total fantasy. We're on our own. It's never going to happen. Call me every name in the book.
Right.
Where do you get off? You're an idiot. Like, really, it was actually interesting. And it actually reminded me that, it's that much more important than I think we even realize, especially in restaurants.
I couldn't agree more. To a certain extent, there are operators who are always going to be ahead of the wave. They're going to be so far out in front because they recognize a good strategy or a good idea worth implementing or at least playing around with. And there are going to be those that are going to come kicking and screaming to the table. The unfortunate thing is those that are kicking and screaming may not necessarily have a table to be brought to because their operations may be closed by then. I mean, it is just so tight out there. And I am empathetic and understanding of the weight of responsibility that some GMs, DMs, chefs, managers have. Absolutely. I mean, it is absolutely fucking crushing. Yet, if we don't make some small strides towards protecting our associates' emotional and physical safety, I think for the most part we got, right? We've got OSHA in the United States. And to your point about these laws that are being implemented, about 8 months ago, I talked to an Australian chef who works in Germany who told me it is illegal for him to contact an associate out of work hours.
Yep.
Can't call him on a day off. Can't call him in.
Nope.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so that changes the dynamic a lot because here in the United States, we have this implication that you are always available, right? And it's a different thing if you're on a call list and you have to call in, to see if you're going to pick a shift. But, here's a LinkedIn user who said part of my interview process asks candidate what they do daily to keep them of sound mind and body and escape reality. Okay, escape reality, cool. That might lead to a couple other things. But my expectation is they'd be 100% mentally healthy and physically outside of work and then be able to give their job 100% inside the walls, which is kind of like, a new way of thinking in that we're not just hiring a pair of hands or a position on a schedule, even though that's the way you might organize your schedule, which makes sense for a bunch of different reasons. So we celebrate this LinkedIn user for their capacity to actually think outside the box. And there is nothing saying that an operator can't say to his staff, okay, we're implementing a new policy. We will never call you on your day off. Or we won't call you after hours. Now you might have a call, a scheduled check-in, but there's nothing saying that things that are happening in other countries can't be applied to our current operations here in the United States. And by the way, Canada, Calgary just got named one of the top 10 places to live in the world. So, yep. Had a couple places in Canada. Bitch, man, doing well up there.
Yeah. And that concept around, this LinkedIn user with this question around what are you doing to keep yourself protected and keep yourself motivated and keep yourself healthy and, those things. I mean, props to that operator for actually doing that.
Yeah.
I think that, what I would encourage every employer, whether they're in restaurants or not, but every employer to think about is how powerful would it be if you could say to your people, listen, I expect that you work hard when you come to work, right? There's that one side, right? This is your job. You got to work hard, but we're going to implement something to protect you from having to work too hard.
Correct.
We're going to do things for you to not just say, here's an extra $1. Thanks for working your butt off. Not just, here's an extra day off. Thanks for working so hard. We're going to actually do something proactively as a business in terms of, and use data as we've discussed a lot in the past to do that so that we don't even have to have the conversation about burnout.
Right.
Because we already know we're protecting how hard the team has to work. Right. I mean, think about that from an employee standpoint. You're talking to your friends about, and they're telling you how exhausted they are and burnt out they are. And I go, well, my employer actually has a system and a strategy that they use to protect us from burnout.
Right.
It's totally different, right? Let's flip that.
Yeah. That gets back to like, okay, now all of a sudden that shifts the perspective on the street because listen, if you're getting treated really well at work, chances are you're going to talk about it. Right? Just because what you hear from everybody else is such a horror show and you shake your head. But pretty soon that operation now becomes a point of attraction for staff who want to work hard, who want to do the things that they love. This other thing about badge of honor, there came a point in my career where I felt like I had been tricked. I had been bamboozled.
This should be good.
I had been taken advantage of because of the passion that I had, right? Some operator looked at me and said, man, he's really passionate about what he does.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to ride that like a rented mule until he can no longer pull that plow. And did that time and time and time again until I started to create healthy boundaries for myself and be able to say no. There's some really great, funny Facebook reels and TikToks about where they're playing the part of an employer and an employee about getting asked to do extra stuff. And some of them are funny, but some of them are like pretty poignant, like where you kind of look at that, go, why do I always say yes? Why can't I say no?
Yeah.
Like, what am I afraid of losing if I say, no, I'm not going to go to this non-mandatory company outing that they're not paying for? They're not paying us, right? We're going to do a picnic or whatever, which is great for team building. But again, I always made sure that meetings were scheduled, that people got paid for them, regardless of whether they had to come in from the outside or, it's on shift. These are just small accommodations, acknowledging the fact that they're human beings that we're dealing with. And one of the things I posted about this week is there is a circular economy and marketplace called Resource Network that is here in Asheville, Austin, Texas, about 5 other cities where you as a vendor or as a restaurateur can start a marketplace and sell your product. So now you have this other potential client base, and you get paid in resource dollars, which are secured by their own cryptocurrency called Source. But then you can also turn around and use those those resource dollars as benefits to your associates because they can book massages, hyperbaric chamber sessions, yoga. There's even companies down there. There's one here in Asheville that does awesome organic raw food delivery. It's just like a basket of, vegetables and meat and all that kind of stuff. The associates can use all of that, and it hasn't cost you a dime, but it gives your associate an ability to, now here's all these resources that you have an ability to have access to that didn't exist before. Yeah. And you have a brand new potential market. So there are definitely ways to rattle the cage of those of us who want to still hustle and remind each of us that, it's important to take time. It's important to continue to sharpen the spear as well as softening your heart, because if we're sensitive people, why the hell do we want to close our hearts to either customers or to our fellow associates?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you were saying earlier about making sure that people, whoever's, taking the time out of their day to listen to us rant about this stuff, make sure they've got a couple of things to take away. And, the hustle side of things is still ultimately going to help, determine success or not. Right.
Sure.
But it's about thinking about it differently. Hustle when we need to, not all the time. And to your comment a second ago around this, feeling like you have to show up to that unpaid staff meeting or whatever it was. The crazy thing about, thinking back over the last few years and how our industry's changed so much, there's always been this retention issue in restaurants. It was just masked by worker supply.
Right.
So don't come to the staff meeting. I don't care. There's someone, we'll get rid of you, and there's someone that will replace you tomorrow. And now, ain't happening.
I know. Jim, that's about all we have time for today. We want to really appreciate Stanley and John Stapleforth and a few other viewers for putting in their comments. We really appreciate it. It certainly helps guide our dialogue on the show.
Absolutely.
Because we're doing this as a service. It's taking time out of our day. We're happy to do it, not only because we get to be with one another and talk some mad shit, but also to be in the inquiry of what it would look like to co-create a restaurant industry that anyone would be proud to work in. So I'm down, and I guess I would answer. And for those of you who are watching this on replay, please add your comments below, because we're going to ask, are you with us? Who's with me? Right, Jim Taylor?
Who's with me? Let's make some moves. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, my pleasure. That's it for this week on Turning the Table, and we'll see you next Thursday. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Turning the Table with me, Adam Lamb, and Jim Taylor. This episode was sponsored by Benchmark 60. We're on a mission to change the food and beverage industry by focusing on staff mental health and well-being, by forecasting and actively managing workload productivity. Over 200 restaurants and food and beverage operations have discovered for themselves how to increase staff retention and become a preferred employer in their market by using our proprietary system. If you'd like to have an operational culture that everybody wants to work for, then check out Benchmark 60 on the web at www.benchmark60.com. Thanks for taking the time to be with us and the courage to try new things for the restaurant profession's oldest problems. Turning the Table is a production of Realignment Media.